Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. As Kelly said, I'm Troy, the host of the Pastured Pig Podcast. I pray that everyone is having a good December so far, despite a global pandemic and shortage of toilet paper again, and all of those fun things. Excited to have with me another great interview. It's one of those things, I just haven't found a bad one yet. Now, you guys may think some were better than others, but I haven't had one where I'm just like, okay, there's no way in the world I can play this. This person is an absolute bore. But I haven't run into that at all. It's been great. You guys have been very gracious to come on and talk and share your experiences, share the ups, share the downs, share the things you've learned, share the things you haven't learned yet. That's my list, the things I've yet to learn. So I really appreciate everybody coming on. Today I have with me on the interview a fellow West Virginian, which is exciting to talk to West Virginians. I think you can pick up in our conversation that we kind of hit it off well. But just talking to Owen, I really thought hit it off well, thought we had a great conversation. It's just neat to talk to other West Virginians. I don't know why that's the case. It may be there's just so few of us. But instead of talking about it more, I'll just dive right in. You guys can listen for yourself and see how the conversation went. And we'll do some updates on the backside. Today I have with me a fellow West Virginian, although I have to say where he is in West Virginia is about as far away as you can get and still be in West Virginia for me. But today I have Owen McAteer from Capon Bridge, West Virginia. So welcome, Owen.
Thank you for having me.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. So a fellow West Virginian. I don't get too many. I think I've only had one other West Virginian on him, come to think of it. Now maybe.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. There's a couple on my list, but I haven't been able to get them yet. It's neat to talk to a fellow West Virginian. So,
well, I'm honored then.
Yeah, exactly. So, are you a born and raised West Virginian, or are you a transplant?
Born and reared.
All right, very good. I like it. Reared. Yep, said it correctly too. So, that's the thing. You don't find too many West Virginia transplants. Usually, it's people are from West Virginia, and you find them elsewhere. There's not too many people coming.
I was going to say we usually export ours. We don't necessarily import a whole lot.
Exactly. So what's interesting, so as I mentioned in the intro there, Owen's farm is in the Eastern Panhandle. If anybody has a little West Virginia geography lesson here, it's an opportunity to talk about our lovely state. But geography, West Virginia has two panhandles, one in the east, one in the north, and where Owen is located is actually further east in West Virginia than most of the contiguous land in Virginia. Yeah, so wrap your brain around that one. But yeah, it's we call that the other West Virginia because that looks
right.
Totally different than what it's like over here. Do you get over to Western West Virginia much? You ever been to the Charleston area much?
We try to stay away from the Western West Virginia too much, but no, we like to go down into we like to go to Kanawha and over to Wheeling. My people are originally from Fairmont, and just south of Morgantown, southwest of Morgantown.
All right.
So we frequent that area to some degree. We don't head south too often, but we do like it down there.
Yeah.
River and then things like that.
Yeah, exactly. A beautiful part. I think I can drive to D.C. faster than I can drive to where you are, but it's funny how that works.
You might be right. Yep. Yeah.
All right. Well, okay, enough of West Virginia geography. Let's dive in and talk about pastured pigs. So give me a 40,000-foot elevation view of your setup, your farm name, what you're working on, and what kind of breed you're dealing with.
Well, I originally grew up in Shepherdstown, which is even further on the Panhandle. Like we're at the very end of the Panhandle, and just off of outside of Charlestown and Martinsburg, to give you kind of reference. And we had a 40-acre farm there growing up. We raised hogs when we were kids in 4-H, and then I kind of got out of it. Went to college and went to WVU, and then sort of have in the last 5 to 7 years gotten back into it. And now our farm in Cape and Bridge, we run McAteer Farms, and we have the best way I can describe it is it's almost like the head of a hatchet. So it's got a long edge that butts up against about 150 acres worth of woods. Now that's not ours, but it does have a lot of oak trees that our pigs love to go in and forage for. And then kind of comes down and into sort of where it would meet the handle from there.
Yeah.
So if that's kind of a oversimplification of a property line, but yeah, we have 10 acres in Cape and Bridge, and we still run pigs on the 40 acres in Shepherdstown from time to time.
Oh, okay.
It's more sort of the diversity of their food source in a lot of ways. Minus, having to have a 1 hour drive for the pigs kind of sucks for them, but then they get out and they've got 40 acres and black walnuts and acorns and all kinds of stuff to eat, so they forgive me.
Interesting. So I want to stick a pin in that because I want to come back and talk about that in detail here. But as far as your setup goes, so the 10-acre farm is what you consider your home base. That's where you reside, and that's kind of the zone 1 for you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So what breeds are you raising? Do you focus on a specific one?
And when I first started getting back into it, I kind of got enamored with the Mangalitsa, the curly pig, and sort of the concept of a higher end animal, and that's sort of raising heritage hogs and raising kind of a product that almost sold itself. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the goal was to have something along those lines. Now, since then, we've definitely included sort of a much greater genetic variety. So we started with 3 Mangalitsas. They're blonde. There's 3 different types of Mangalitsa. There's the blonde, the swallow belly, or the black, and a red one. Now we started with the blondes, 3 blondes, and then have since added a swallow belly gilt and a red boar since then. Then this is where I've kind of gotten into messing with genetics a little bit more, feeling more comfortable with my setup and my process. And so I'm now kind of experimenting with the genetics. So we also have Berkshire, we have Tamworth, Mulefoot, and Ossabaw Island.
Okay, yeah.
And we do have 2 Coonies, but that's almost like a side gig.
Yeah.
Side project.
That's right. All right. So you're looking at, you said messing with genetics there. Are you looking at crossing some of those, or are you trying to keep those lines clean? What are you doing there?
We crossed a Mulefoot and a Mangalitsa, the red Mangalitsa and the Mulefoot. I'm working on branding, so I've dubbed it the Mulitsa.
Right.
My lovely lady rolls her eyes at me every time I do it, but
right, exactly.
You got to get it out there somehow. So, but
I like that.
Yeah, and then we also did the Berkshire Mangalitsa. Both seem, I like sort of the conformations of each one. The Berkshire definitely has a more stout frame, much bigger hams, much bigger kind of tenderloin than a Mangalitsa would. And the Mulefoot actually kept its sort of very slender ham on the back, on the hind legs, which we're just kind of messing around with what do these crosses kind of end up looking like. Not saying you're going to try to get the perfect pig, but genetics is it's a Pandora's box of things that you can get into.
All right. So are you keeping this at the F1 level? So you're just taking that first generation to see what you're getting? Or are you going to go deeper with those generations and keep crossing?
We'll probably try to go deeper with some generations, depending on what we see grow out.
Yeah. Okay.
We're definitely interested in in seeing if we can get certain attributes of certain animals, and almost to the point. I mean, it's just like basically cross-pollinating plants in a lot of ways, where you're trying to find disease resistance, cold hardy, depending on your location, and and we are, I looked it up, and I think we're definitely in a much higher elevation than sort of our surrounding area. I travel to Winchester to go to work, and I drop my elevation by 800,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So then, in that elevation, you just sort of recognize your territory and your terrain, and then my goal is to kind of like build an animal that just thrives on that,
right?
Essentially, or the mulefoot or the Mangalitsa is exceptional in regards to hardiness. It's got a coat that basically it sheds in the summer, and is thick in the winter. In sub-zero temps, it's still outside. I mean, we have shelters for it, but it still sleeps outside. I mean, we can't make it go in. So
right, yeah, that's good to see how it responds to your environment there. So you talked about your branding name is the Mulitsa there on the first one. What's the second one? Is that a Berkalitsa or is that a?
It's the Mangashire.
Mangashire, okay.
Yeah.
Good call. All right, I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about this two farm setup. So, if your 10 acres there in Capon is the home base, and you've got 40 over in Shepherdstown, what's your mode of operation there? Is when you move them, and are you moving specific pigs at certain times, or a litter stays here, a litter stays there?
Yeah. So, we the always the goal is to kind of follow research that's already been done. Somebody's already worked for you, so you might as well just kind of at least start there. Use that as a start. The the thing that we read was that basically you can feed nuts and acorns and walnuts and whatever all you want, but really they start to absorb that flavor within the last few months before they're processed.
Yeah.
So the goal would be to just sort of processing at certain points, with them foraging for those particular nuts and seeds and stuff like that. The other side of that is, how much corn are you feeding up until that point, or something, kind of, again, you're looking at different research. But even as you look at research, you still have to go with kind of your own, what you see and what you notice when you get your product back from the processor. So right now we kind of the black walnuts they fell like last month. So right now anybody that's going to the processor, we have a processing date in January, that's a whole nother story, because a whole
right,
that whole they exploded as far as that business model, but so right now we're moving the hogs that will be going probably onto much bigger pasture, a lot of walnuts, a lot of forage, still feeding our non-GMO grains, and getting whatever they want, really.
Yeah, good deal. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're using the 40 acres and is basically your finished setup depending on the time of year.
In a lot of ways, yeah. Like I said, where I'm At this point, I like my process, and I like how I move the animals, the rotational grazing, everything like that. Now I'm kind of saying I want to play with. All right, we finished this group on acorns. We finished this group on black walnuts. What's the difference? Do we have the same pigs, same genetic breed on acorns and the same ones on black walnut? And what's the difference? What's the taste profile, that you're kind of working with? So that's usually where I find it the most interesting, I guess.
Yeah, that resonates with me too. I'm a data geek by trade, but so let's unpack that a little bit. So you're looking at you're trying to have your control there of the same breed stock, one finishing on a specific type of protein, another finishing on another. So you're looking at taste profile. What other data points are you capturing and looking at other than taste, or is it just all flavor based?
I mean, at the end of the day, it should be flavor, like in a lot of ways. Now, again, we still eat with our eyes first, and then then the nose and sort of things like that. So you still want a good looking chop or a good looking tenderloin. So animal conformation is big with what you choose. Like I was saying about the Berkshires. The Berkshire added a very boxy, very stout-looking, genetic profile to the Mangalitsa's. That the mother of the Mangalitsa, the mother was a Mangalitsa that had a very long back, not real big tenderloins, and the Mangalitsa have much bigger shoulders than they do hips. So they have a very narrow hip, and then sort of the shoulders, and then they kind of spread, like they're a very pear shape almost. Mm-hmm. And the ones that we have now have a bigger uniform, like evenness to it. So that's something we're kind of like, well, all right, that could mean good things or bad things. It's sort of, it's sort of phosphorus, or it can either be either good or bad, basically.
Right. Gotcha. So you're saying your F1s, they filled out a little bit more in the rear because of the Berkshire genetics coming in.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
Good deal. So that raises another question. I'm hopping all over the place here, but what you're saying is interesting.
Man.
Yeah. So did you just go? So you had a female. So your dam was a Mangalitsa, and your sire was a Berkshire. Did you have any issues? Was she a gilt? Did you have any issues with birthing because of the bigger frames? Did you any issues there?
We did, not that we noticed. We bred two to the Berkshire, and we had him. We had one that we kind of knew she wasn't a great mother to begin with. We had since had her with another Mangalitsa boar, the blonde Mangalitsa boar, and she had several just stillbirths. She had more stillbirths than we were kind of hoping for, she was still around purely sentimental. She really is she's the first one. She was my girl. I really shouldn't, but I did, and so she got sort of a second shot at this. And then, so we did it. We birthed her with the Berkshire, or we bred her with the Berkshire. Still about the same litter size. A couple, not as many stillbirths, which I guess is, but she's going to go to the processor come this January. So I can't. It was just too much for me to do on that one. That was her second strike and she's out kind of thing. But as far as the gilt that we bred, we had a really, really good success. Six on her first go. Everyone's healthy. She's been a great mom. So we didn't notice anything in terms of the birthing process that she had problems in any way. So very optimistic about that.
Okay. So and apologize if you've said this already. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. Do you currently maintain a breeding pair for Manga and then a breeding pair for Berkshire, so you can replenish those gilts and boars you need, or are you having to go out and acquire those if you're going to go that direction?
At this point we're looking elsewhere to bring other stuff back in.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not genetic lines. I'm all about adding new genetics to it, adding new just kind of like just new stock kind of coming in, just for the sake of I don't like the idea too much of crossbreeding at this point, or even the potential of crossbreeding, or line breeding in this instance. Now down the road, yeah, I would probably say once we kind of hone in and feel like this is a good pair that we need to kind of have it like stockpile, I guess, but having the same litters off of these, then yes, I would definitely say we'll probably have a pair down the road.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess that kind of depends on how, like you say, all this testing plays out, and you see that you may be really onto something here, so you keep those two sides clean and then cross when you need to. Excellent. So again, my goodness, I am all over the place. So going back to your testing process, so when you're doing this quality control, kind of looking at flavor and the profile, texture, those type of things, is that based on your opinion, or do you have a customer base that you say, okay, guys, here we go, I want you to try this out and tell me what you like best? How deep are you going down that rabbit hole?
Probably deeper than I should.
Okay.
Like honestly, like you get. You can have 1,500 different opinions,
right?
And and you get no answers and back out of that. So really, I sort of know what I like in a piece of pork. I want marbling. I want a good fat cap. I want good texture on the actual meat, and then really I look at the pork chop. Now, that being said, the Mangalitsa bacon was excellent, but you don't have a lot of bacon to it.
Right.
I guess
yield's lower. Yeah.
It's very fatty. But then the flip side is we make some exceptional lard and exceptional cracklings. From that. So then you kind of you can get a lot of opinions and get no answers, kind of thing.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
So I definitely go down, and I want a lot of information. But what I try to do is I try to go to less consumers and more towards chefs.
Ah, okay.
Yes. Is
Very
what
good.
I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're looking at your market there, and that was going to be my next question. Are you primarily selling cuts to end users? Are you doing wholes and halves, or are you selling to a restaurant market?
Honestly, we're kind of getting a little bit of everything,
okay.
And I probably shouldn't concentrate on one thing. Marketing is not my strong suit. Let me go ahead and say it. I love the hell out of farming, but marketing is still a foreign concept to me.
Sure.
And that's unfortunately sort of where you make your bread. But right now, we try to do, we definitely do cuts. There's a couple retail shops that we get, or that we have locally, that will pick up our cuts. We've definitely sold to a couple of chefs and sort of restaurants. That's a little bit, I don't like relying on them as far as they want, 20 pork chops, or 30 pork chops for their meal, and then the rest of the hog you kind of have to deal with somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then but ultimately I think I would love to sell just halves and wholes, more so than anything. I think it would just be easiest, and that allows the consumer to actually try different parts of the hog that they may not normally take, or you have amazing cuts of meat off of everything, off of just about. You can use the whole animal for everything. So I try to encourage people to really to branch out from what they actually, I guess, what their norms are in terms of like pork chops, bacon, ham. That's about it, you know.
Well, you know, and you raise a good point, and this is by no means an indictment against your operation, because it sounds like you're recognizing that you've got to figure out where it goes, and this is always the big challenge: is okay, all the eggs in one basket. So if you said, okay, I'm going to focus specifically on restaurants, we're really going to cater to the high-end chef market, and then COVID hits, and we hear people that have run into that, and it's like overnight their entire customer base just vaporized. Whereas if you go, okay, well, we're going to do individual cuts, then like you said, we got to figure out how to produce and get the less desirable cuts sold. And then with wholes and halves, then you got to try to have this eclectic supply that says, okay, yeah, here's a great pork chop, but here's also great bacon. And then, yeah, dealing with the heritage with the lard, it's like, okay, do our customers even understand what you can do with lard, the beauty of that? Because if I'm selling them a lard pig on hanging weight and they realize, wow, I paid all this money on hanging weight, but there's a huge bunch of lard that I don't know anything to do with. So it really is, you find yourself in this conundrum, and I think all of us as producers can end up talking ourselves in circles. But I appreciate the fact that you're starting to look at that data and starting to write it down and identify to see, okay, which direction really do I need to go with my product?
Exactly. Yep. And that's honestly, that's all we've kind of like. Again, Candace is probably, hates hearing this, but like I'm still in like almost a research phase.
Sure.
In this and I mean, I really don't feel like I'll ever get out of the research phase if I'm doing this right, kind of thing. So I really I would love to have sort of almost a variety of animal that, yes, this animal goes to a chef, or these, the chef would like this one better just because it has a more desirable cut, bigger of it, or, it has a certain flavor profile that he really likes. And then this animal is better for, your consumer, the half and whole guy. And it's not, completely like just a fatty lard pig that they're going to have, 4 gallons of lard and they don't know what to do with,
Right, so, exactly.
Yeah, so it'd be cool to like kind of to mess around with and almost have a particular product for a particular consumer base, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that's the thing when you pencil that out on paper, and I'm with you. I'm starting year 7, and I don't think I have a single element of my operation nailed down where I say, okay, this is now static. I've gotten all this figured out. This is exactly how I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Maybe transporting my animals from here to the processor is about the only thing I've got nailed down. But so it's one of those things where you're constantly exploring that. But when you pencil out on paper, it starts to make sense. And then I think the challenge for all of us to say, oh, wow, okay, if I have category 1, 2, and 3, it diversifies my market, it keeps me protected, I'm insulated from really crazy market fluctuations that we see. But then it becomes the logistics and the operation. It's like, okay, how do I keep these 3 different areas maintained and separated and processing time? So it adds more work when it comes time to actually be out in the field doing stuff. But
exactly.
So it's really neat to sit down and measure all that and, okay, weigh the cost to say, well, I want to do this, but do I have the manpower, the time, and the infrastructure to be able to implement it?
Yeah, no, you're 100%. Because then, too, like when you came up and you said, when COVID hits, like all of a sudden, like there was just this mad dash of like, what do you guys have? We'll buy it, and we sold out of all of our cuts almost, within a month.
Right. Yeah.
And then sort of like, okay, well, there are more people still asking for all, for more meat. So then I made the decision to tap into breeding stock, and I, I don't regret it, but I kind of do. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, I'll get into this. I'll process this girl. One, because the guy that I take my hogs to process, I mean, he was like, if you're going to do it, you got to get on the books now, because he has been filling up like crazy, and we've had to now schedule out, January of 2022, and then, April of 2022 and almost till 2023 kind of thing. Crazy. So, which, good for him. That's amazing business, but.
Oh, it is, but it's so frustrating as a producer, and I agree. Here we are, right. Where we are here in central southern West Virginia. It was, I'm booking dates to have pigs processed that haven't even been born yet, and it becomes frustrating because you're like, okay, this is something I usually didn't worry about until after weaning, and I knew how many live animals were going to be staying on the farm here versus. Trying to forecast before, I've got, if I have two pregnant sows, it's like, okay, I have no idea. So, and I think it's tough on the processors as well because everybody's going to take that worst case scenario. So I'm calling the processor and say, hey, book me for 20 on this date.
Right.
Because I've got 2 pigs are going to farrow. Now, I'm probably bringing them 9. So at some point, it's one of those deals where it's like, okay, that date I scheduled for 20, it's actually going to be 9. And maybe they're relieved. Maybe you're like, oh, crap, there goes some... that's half. That's less than half of what we expected. So, all of this is going to flush itself out at some point, whether producers add more capability or things go back to the way they were. I don't know which is best or worse in that situation.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny you say that because when you start to does this alter our food system? Does this kind of have this kind of will we kind of just sort of say, okay, let's go back to where we were, or is it kind of the kick in the butt that says, okay, we need to, our food chain is definitely needs some tweaking, and that we definitely need to kind of adjust to that.
Yeah.
But for small scale people like us, it's kind of like, yeah, we need that kind of, we hope for that kick in the butt. Hey, we need to look for other avenues for our processing, and small farms are, a good way to go.
Yeah, and again, and from a purely selfish perspective on my part, what
right.
I would like to see, I agree. I think this has been a wake up call for our food process, our national food chain, to say this doesn't work. We got to fix this. We're dealing with the birth pains of something new coming out of it, and hopefully, if we can stay out of our own way, then maybe there's some more relaxed regulation, or maybe more processors come online, or they add additional capacity, and this centralized food processing market gets very, very diversified. I would love to see 5 new processors within 2 hours of me, because right now I really have 1 or 2 to choose from. So from a selfish perspective, like, man, yeah, let's get more processors, let's diversify this. But then we also see when you do that, there's obviously more. There's more capacity, so there could be more pig farmers coming online. So if I get 5 new processors, I could have 10 new farms in my area that we're trying to go after the same market share.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I guess it will ultimately it has to almost see what happens, sort of thing, and play itself out. But to be honest, I'd rather take a chance at 5 new pig farmers coming in,
right,
versus going back to the sort of CAFO method of here's a 1 acre lot housing 400, 500 pigs at a time, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, and I would love to see some regulation get moved. Simply, maybe even for the sake of national security to some degree. But I think I've mentioned on the podcast before. So, yeah, in West Virginia, of course, we have a lot of bordering states. We have 5 states around us, just because of the odd shape of our state. So within an hour, I can drive to just across the river in Ohio, and there's a processor that I wouldn't give it a second thought to go on and eating anything off the floor in their place. It's just absolutely spotless. Gorgeous processor, but they're only Ohio state inspected. So the fact that they're 10 minutes across the state line, I legally can't go over there and have any of my stuff processed and brought back over. Now, I know what that processor looks like for a reason, and I'll just leave it at that. But it's one of those things. It's like, this is so frustrating for a producer to have something as stupid as a river separate us and say, this is why you can't, this is the only reason why you can't move it across. It's like, well, the people in Ohio can eat this meat and be fine, but if I bring it across the river for some reason, it's unsuitable. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, there's definitely, I would say leave it at the fact that there needs to be some sort of change. There needs to be some alterations.
Anyway, I didn't mean to get on my soapbox, and obviously.
No. I'm 100% behind you. 100%.
Cool. All right. So getting back to man, I really like what I'm hearing from you, and I love the data aspect of it. It's to me it's something I relate to. So so your inputs, the other input that we haven't talked about, you've mentioned a little bit, is your feed. So the forage, of course, that they're getting, but what are you doing? Are you going with a standard ration? I think I heard you say non-GMO. Are you playing around with your rations to see how that works as well?
We definitely do. Again, like I said, like science is my base, is my foundation, and then you try to build on whatever you can off of that. So I love reading different articles. Talking about trying to limit the amount of, especially with a lard pig or a fatty pig, you're trying to limit the amount of beta carotene that they get because of you don't want that sort of yellow hint to the fat, that a fat soluble mineral or vitamin would ultimately kind of like get absorbed there. So we try to say, okay, anything that does have that, I want to see. I mean, now I haven't tested against it. I should make that caveat, is I have never tested against the data, I guess is what I'm saying.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So if they've been saying that beta carotene has that yellowing, to my own fault, I've sort of taken that as the gold standard. So I limit the amount of corn that they get, which, what should I probably just almost feed one hog solely corn and see if that actually holds true? Maybe. But, people smarter than me have done a lot more research on it than I'm going to ever do in my lifetime.
Exactly.
So I'll listen for when I can, and just play around with it, on my own scale. Yeah. We try to say, okay, what is, because corn's, it's cheap, it's a great filler, in a lot of ways. What's the limit that we can probably do that to in terms of the ratio of feed? You have 40% barley, 40% wheat, and 11% corn. Well, you got to come up with, another 9% of something else. So we've added sunflower sometimes, depending on the year. We try to get them to eat seasonally a little bit. And then, that's just the feed mix. That doesn't include what they get as far as their daily intake and what that is in relation to their, overall, food for the day, because they'll still have pasture, they'll still have forage. We also have we get a brewer's grain from a local brewery.
Yeah.
Try to limit that, just because it's more like a filler. It's more like rice at this point. It's definitely high in protein. Definitely, got carbohydrate to it. Not, a ton of nutritional value. But we can also take that, supplement that with like minerals and different stuff like that that we get from just a big bag of minerals. You mix it with brewer's grain, and it elevates the health benefits a little bit. I'm not saying a lot, but again, we try to find different outlets for the for the animals to have a new food sources as much as they possibly can.
Yeah.
So then, the next step is our pasture, and we try to make sure that our pastures, we feed our pastures with stuff that they like to eat. We found that they don't like alfalfa that much, so we don't usually sow alfalfa into our fields, or they'll eat some clovers, but not all kinds of clovers. The vetch they love. They go through amaranth, and then on top of that they go through weeds. They prefer weeds in a lot more like scenarios than something that looks like really good as far as a pasture. The thistle, I would have thought they would have just stayed away from completely, but they chew on that like it's candy.
Yeah, it's funny to see, and then of course, like you say, with the different breeds, this is my first year for Tamworth large black cross, and they love stiltgrass, and I have Japanese stiltgrass all over the place, which is an issue of its own. But to watch them eat it, I'm like, oh, okay, I think I've just found the way to mitigate stiltgrass all over the place. We're just going to introduce these pigs to these areas, and they're doing a great job keeping it in. Now I've got to figure out how to reseed something that can beat out the stiltgrass. But it's fantastic to see just what they gravitate toward, because what you think would be logical for a certain type of livestock may not necessarily be.
Yeah, and honestly, that's what we kind of another component to what we kind of like, just in terms of our observation when you're going through sort of the soap note of hog raising. We know that certain hogs do better on pasture, obviously, and than others. And one other reason I went to a Mangalitsa was that they do have a tendency to gravitate towards pasture, grasses, stuff like that initially. And another reason I myself have also brought in a Tamworth gilt because she loves grass,
mm-hmm.
and she loves pasture.
Yeah.
The Berkshire Moor, he actually loves to tear grass or pasture apart. And he does a very good job of it.
Right.
And so really sort of then you kind of like say, okay, well, we can't, keep having him on pasture creating these, craters, these bomb craters that he's able to do. However, at the end of the day, it's kind of a very permaculture principle of like, well, okay, if he does a certain thing, let's make him do a certain thing. What is his job? Salatin-esque kind of, concept, Seth Holder's type stuff. So then basically he's now kind of our designated pond digger, or like little pond digger, or he will go into the garden and till up.
Right.
That is his job. So, again, like I said, this is, we know subjectively what he's capable of doing, what his tendencies are, and then objectively what we have observed is just him being, doing what pigs do best and root. So then, that's, you just kind of make sure you play with that and make sure that he does his thing and he's happy where he is.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I've got two more questions I want to ask you. I don't want to keep you too long. I'm having a great conversation here, but I don't want to blow your whole day here. But with where you are in Capon, what's your topography like? You talk about being higher elevation. Do you have a decent topography roll? Are you flat on top of that ridge? What are you dealing with on your 10 acres?
It's pretty. It's got a good roll to it in a lot of ways. And what I mean is that it has, again, 10 acres isn't much, but it's ours, and so it's got a nice flat roll that kind of dips into a valley, and there's if you kind of go towards like almost, again, geeking out on this kind of stuff, but the P.A. Yeoman concept of water for every farm, it's almost set up perfectly for particular watering holes kind of along the way where it would follow a valley and you create swales and sort of like, just water catchment areas and whatnot. So that's, our topography is it's still hilly, but it's got a very gentle roll to it and we are sort of at the top of a ridge. Cooper Mountain, we actually go back down if you're heading towards Romney, and you go back down, and then you have to come back up, and then you kind of go back down, and it's got a lot of rolling hills surrounding us. But for us, mostly it's pasture, and we've sort of secretly, hopefully, the guy that lives behind us that has 150 acres worth of woods doesn't listen to your podcast. No offense, but we've been kind of
right.
throwing our throwing our pigs in there every once in a while.
Sure.
Clean up some acorns.
Just vacuuming. It's all they're doing.
Yeah. So but that's not like it's more like, hey, flash graze them, get them out of there kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of pasture. We just moved there last November.
Oh, okay.
We've only been there a year.
Good.
And so it still needs work, but it's kind of the vision is there. I guess I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like it. Now that's one thing I was wondering. Is talked to some of the guy I interviewed just here recently. He was just outside of Dallas, and he said on his, I can't remember how big it was, but it was a substantial tract of land, and he's like, there's zero elevation change. It is flat as a pancake. And of course, having 100 acres here in central West Virginia, it's like, okay, I would love to have a spot that I could turn my truck around with a trailer. That's I've got one place on the front of the property where I can do that. The rest is just typical West Virginia hillside.
That makes us the best at going in reverse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone's always impressed when they watch our YouTube channels how Kelly can back a trailer all the way down the driveway. But it's just,
I tell people all the time I could probably drive better in reverse than I can forward.
Right, exactly. But yeah, it's one of those things that raises a challenge. But and you mentioned some of the permacultural elements of this, and I think that's always advantageous for a pastured operation. Is just to read the land, watch, observe what it does before you make any of these massive infrastructure changes, because the land's going to tell you something as far as what to do and what not to do. So,
absolutely,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna wrap up with a question I like to ask everyone, Owen. So you're not going to be able to escape that.
Absolutely.
What is your best experience or favorite part about raising pigs on pasture?
I can only go back to, and this, I'll not to twist your question. It's not my best experience, but it's my most memorable experience.
Okay, that'll work. I'll allow that.
Okay. I was going to say, let me check with you and make sure that's okay.
Yep. Got a thumbs up from the judges.
When the first time we farrowed. Now, normally, all growing up, we had, basically pigs come in at, 10 weeks or whatever they were, 8 weeks. We raise them till the fair. After the fair, they're gone. That was our experience as far as raising pigs. That was a year in, year out for however long we did it. And, we raised the land race, and we raised, the Yorkshire crosses that just grew in 6 months. So those were our first experiences. Now, when I finally got back into it, when we finally got a boar and had, our girls bred, you don't realize how damn cute these pigs are when they're born. And so then growing up, you're kind of raising them from what you remember them, when they do their little butt scratch on something, and you're just like thinking about that. And now it's time to, and now it's time to process. And you're like, well, how am I going to do this? I can't even, it started to become this moral internal conflict within me. And I was in this dilemma and this moral, just agitation. And I was feeding, and I was with about 15 of them, and I think they thought that I had more food than I did, or they didn't see where I had actually put the food on the trough, and they knocked me down. Yeah. And I basically. And I don't have to tell you how strong pigs are and how strong pigs' necks are. And they basically held me to the ground. And they weren't biting, but they're kind of taking little nips and little kind of checking and seeing and taking little tears of my jacket or something like that. Just 15, and I'm swinging fists, throwing haymakers left and right to just get up out of this cavalcade of hogs. And that moral dilemma kind of went away. I was like, you know what? Turned around, I think you guys would eat me, so I'm good.
That's right.
And I was able to walk away from that one.
I love it. Yeah. That was the realization of how quickly you could go down a rung on the food chain.
Exactly. And there's the stories that come back up. You're like, oh yeah, I did hear about a woman having a heart attack and then her hogs ate her.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that, and I agree that is the dilemma. I have a hard time dispatching even when we process chickens. It's just that time that you have respect for the animal and you appreciate it. But I have to say I've got one boar. I've got 3 boars, and it's too many right now. But so I've got one boar, and I think he knows his name's on the list because he's just, I call him Napoleon because he's the smaller of the 3 and he's got little man syndrome. So when I step into the pen to feed them or do anything, he's trying to knock me over. He likes to stick his nose under the bucket and try to spill it prematurely. So yeah, I'm going to look forward to his date. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's on my list. Well, all right. Well, man, I really appreciate that conversation. Good conversation. Appreciate you sharing your setup with us, and glad you came on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, well, I'm going to let you go, and I pray you have a great weekend. I think if you're getting the same weather pattern that we are, I think you're going to have a great weekend leading into the Thanksgiving week. So make the most of it.
It's got to be better than the last couple of days, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, man, take care. So I really appreciate Owen coming on, taking the time to speak with me there. Again, as I mentioned, love having a fellow West Virginian on. It's funny. So Owen lives in the Eastern Panhandle. If you know anything about West Virginia geography, which most of you don't, because most of you don't even know that West Virginia is a state. But if you know anything about West Virginia geography, Eastern Panhandle is the part that sticks out over Virginia, Maryland, almost gets you to Washington, D.C., and still be in West Virginia, believe it or not. But it's funny because he lives in a place called Cape and Bridge, West Virginia, which any good West Virginian knows. When you took 8th grade, when I was in 8th grade, it was called junior high. That shows you how old I am. So 8th grade middle school, you had West Virginia history, and the best students throughout the state that did well in West Virginia history could actually sit for what was called the Golden Horseshoe exam. And if you excelled statewide, you could win the coveted Golden Horseshoe. But I remember one of the things about that area where he lives was the proper pronunciation of his town. It was Capon, Capin, all this discussion. And then, of course, just over the ridge, over the mountain from him was Cacapon. They had an extra syllable there. So it was like Cacapone, Cacapon. Yeah, so it was always this contentious thing in junior high as to how you actually pronounce that, and everybody has their own take. But that's the uniqueness of West Virginia. My marketing company office is located in a town called Hurricane. It's spelled like hurricane, but if you come to West Virginia and you pronounce it hurricane, then we know you're not from around here. But to get to Hurricane, I have to drive through a little town called Tornado. So very interesting, of which we get neither. We get neither tornadoes nor hurricanes in West Virginia. The irony there. All right, well, enough about West Virginia geography. As far as updates at Red Tool House goes, not a lot's changed. The mud is still muddy. Haven't had a good freeze yet. Had a little bit of snow. Things that just get you ready for Christmas. Boars are doing well. We are going to eliminate, I think I mentioned you heard in a discussion with Owen there, that Napoleon, he's about to meet his Waterloo. We are getting our supplies together for that and getting prepared. So we'll just detail how that turned out. Obviously, we're not going to detail the actual event. It's audio, so what are you going to be able to pick up on? Our pigs, our piglets that we've had this year, 6 of them have left the farm and are doing whatever they're doing at other farms. That leaves 8 behind that we're going to finish out, and we'll be processing this April. So we'll do updates as well as those turned out. Well, as always, if you would like to be on the podcast, or you have somebody who else should be on the podcast, by all means, go to redtoolhouse.com, click on the Pastured Pig Podcast link. There's a very simple little form you can fill out there that comes to me, gives me all your contact info, details, and I will reach back out to you to schedule something. If I have not reached out to you and you filled out that form in the last week or so, please don't think I'm I'm alienating you or staying away from you. It just means that with all the forms that came through, they kind of come through in waves, and I may have missed one. So by all means, please resubmit, and we'll get you listed on there and get you scheduled. Also, if you have a specific topic you'd like us to get into, we get casual conversation from time to time about being topic specific, and would like to do that and be able to do the research in advance or find the right person to talk to help us with a topic. So by all means, submit topics as well. Well, I pray everyone has a great week, and stay safe, and Merry Christmas. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast, or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.